And they said, men, Galileans, why do you stand looking up at the heavens? So they're standing too. This Jesus who was taken from you will come as you see him going into heaven. Okay, that would be an ancient way of expressing something. I really don't think modern people are able to visualize someone being taken up into heaven because they don't even know where it is anymore. It used to be up in the sky. But since we now know the sky has only got spaceships and meteors up there, it's hard to say where this heaven is anymore. So that's our scientific knowledge has impacted that ability to express these things. So putting a person in a cloud these days isn't going to help you understand where they got to. It's more like 1001 Nights and you know, the people rubbing the genie in the lamp that comes out in a cloud or goes back in a cloud. It's an ancient way of expressing magical things, but I'm not sure it can speak very seriously to modern consciousness. But literally it does. Anyway, so this promise of a return. Anyway, again, the apostles are hanging around, or the disciples, they don't know really where to go. They return to Jerusalem. In the place where you are to go to James the just, for whose sake heaven and earth came in. All this, to my mind, revolves around that kind of statement in the Gospel of Thomas. Now, I may be wrong. And they went to the upper room where they had the Last Supper, I guess. And here are basically the apostles laid out. Peter, James, John, Andrew, Philip, Thomas, Bartholomew, Matthew, James, the son of, or brother of, or of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot, Simon Zelotes in Greek, and Judas of James, or Judas the brother of James. So I've always wondered, and Luke is the only one that has these last three like that. Who are these last three? James of Cleophas, Judas the brother of James, Simon the Zealot, called the Cananean in the other Gospels. This is also in the Gospel of Luke, apostle list. It differs from Mark and Matthew. Does John have the same people? No, he doesn't have the same people, but he doesn't even give an apostle list. John doesn't really enumerate 12 apostles. John is more interested in disciples anyway. He's always speaking about disciples, not so much apostles, and he doesn't give an apostle list. In any case, something like James of Alphaeus in the Synoptic Gospels is more like Nathaniel in the Gospel of John. I cover this in my James book quite a bit, these names of these apostles and how they move around and so on. Nathaniel in Hebrew, you might be interested. He doesn't appear in the other Gospels, as you may know. Nathaniel is a very special person in the first chapter or two of John. The other apostles seem to be very interested in him, and he's sitting under a tree or something, and Jesus says something about him. Anyway, Nathaniel means given by God. But we don't have any other indication who this Nathaniel is or what happens to him, and he evaporates as well as all the other people. I might add, the name of Acts of the Apostles, just like Acti Pilati that you had on your test, means what they did, the deeds. An administration of a governor, it can be the juridical decisions or deeds that he did. This name of this book, I don't know when it finally got its present name, but you'll clearly appreciate that this book is not about the Acts of the Apostles, because the apostles are given short shrift, and the only apostles who seem to really stack up in any way, even though we just mentioned Thomas, he doesn't even come into play really. The only apostles that really stack up are Peter, Philip, and Paul, and some friends of Paul, Barnabas and some others who are not even apostles. So in fact, John Mark, who's not even mentioned as an apostle and so on, so it doesn't really follow the apostles. It follows a little bit Peter for a while, and then when Peter gets into some difficulty with the authorities, it switches over to Paul and its introduction to Paul. But it is not in any way a systematic presentation or a thoroughgoing presentation of what the apostles, whoever they were and if they were as such, presented here. It did, because Bartholomew, no. Matthew, no. Thomas, no. Andrew, no. Judas of James, no. Simon Zelotes, no. James of Alphaeus, no. So I mean, where are the actually apostles? Paul isn't even an apostle, and yet he's the one who gets most prominence. So this book is not, about the actually apostles. It's how Paul becomes the principal leader of the early church. That's what it's about. And by the end, the hero is only Paul. All the others evaporate. We don't even hear what happens to Peter. Do you think the authors didn't know what happened to Peter? Of course they knew. They don't tell us what happened to Peter. They don't even tell us if Paul ever met Peter in any of his travels. They don't tell us what happened in Rome, if Paul met Peter in Rome. They don't tell us anything like that. They don't tell us anything about the election of James, and yet they assume we know who he is. I'm telling you what they're missing. They don't tell us about the death of James, which certainly they knew. It's in Josephus. And in fact, this narrative is still going on when James is killed, and they don't remark it. All they're interested in is Paul in Rome. The time Paul is in Rome is the time James is killed. So I would think that it would be normal for anyone who cared about the early church, even if you don't think James was an apostle, which I'm sure he was, if we can speak of apostles. Paul calls him an apostle, and this James, the son of Alphaeus, is clearly meant to be James. Alphaeus is garbling for probably Cleophas. All you have to do is change the alpha and the, I guess it's a kappa in Greek, and they're very similar letters when they're written. Someone is either purposely or some copyist has garbled the two. Alphaeus is Cleophas for sure, and I can't prove it, but it's absolutely certain. And then if it's James, the son of Cleophas, then we know who he is, because we hear over and over again that Cleophas is the father of the brothers of Jesus. I'm sorry to do these things. I see some of you have a long face. I'm trying to increase your knowledge, not decrease it. I would be remiss in not trying to put a light on these things if I'm trying to, raise the level of your knowledge from theology.